Good morning, wonderful Waypoint, all the brave souls that braved the weather to be here this morning. We are so happy that you're here with us this morning, and we are looking forward to having a coffee with you afterwards. So don't forget, the coffee shop will be open. And online, welcome to you as well. And we really wish you would be in person, but we know that things happen. People who are in hospital, recovering at home, people are away for the weekend. So just enjoy the service online, and we hope to see you in person next weekend. Talking about next weekend, it's Easter weekend, and I want to invite you to two services, the Friday and the Sunday. We will be running full services, full kids areas, so please bring your kids, come as a family, and enjoy the service with us. We have a full morning on Friday and on Sunday, Chronicles of Easter, part 1 and 2, so please don't miss that. And next, the week after Easter, we will start a new series called One Another, and that will run for a few weeks. And then also in May, we have Blueprint. So don't miss Blueprint Conference. It's really a superb conference and series and talks. So please diarize it. It's in about 4 weeks. So please make sure that you keep your week open in May. More of information will follow this week, so please have a look out on all our social media platforms, where it's Facebook and also on our app. Our app has a lot of information, so please download the app. It's for free. You have a lot of information on the app. And in terms of where everything is for the newcomers, you are so welcome. We're happy to see new faces. Remember your free coffee at the coffee shop. And obviously you'll know where the coffee shop is. To get to the bathrooms, you enter past the coffee shop, the way you came in, through the courtyard, brave the rain, just have a short run, and then you'll be at the bathrooms. In terms of service flow, we are having 2 songs, leading us in 2 songs, and then he's going to end the Right in the Eye series this morning with the last part. And then he'll invite the band back on stage. So have a good series. Good morning. Enjoy. Tian, over to you.
Thank you, Jacqueline. I want to invite you guys to stand. We're going to sing the first song. It's a new song here at Waypoint from Hillsong. It's called Good Grace. People come together, strangers, neighbors, our blood is one. Children of every nation, of generations, of kingdom come. So don't let your heart be troubled. Hold your head up high, don't fear no evil. Fix your eyes on this one truth. God is madly in love with you. So take courage, hold on, be strong. Remember where our help comes from. Our salvation is in His blood. Jesus, light of heaven, friend forever, His kingdom come. So don't let your heart be troubled. Hold your head up high, don't fear no evil. Fix your eyes on this one truth. God is madly in love with you. So take courage, hold on, be strong. Remember where our help comes from. We'll sing swing wide, all you heavens. Let the praise go up as the walls come down. All creation, everything with breath, repeat the sound. All these children, clean hands, pure hearts, good grace, good God. His name is Jesus. Swing wide, all you heavens. Let the praise go up as the walls come down. All creation, everything with breath, repeat the sound. All these children, clean hands, pure hearts, good grace, good God. His name is Jesus. His name is Jesus. So don't let your heart be troubled. Hold your head up high, don't fear no evil. And fix your eyes on this one truth. God is madly in love with you. So take courage, hold on, be strong. Remember where our help comes from. Swing wide, all you heavens. Let the praise go up as the walls come down. All creation, everything with breath, repeat the sound. All his children, clean hands, pure hearts, good grace, good God. His name is Jesus. Swing wide, all you heavens.
Let the praise go up
As the walls come down. All creation, everything with breath, repeat the sound. All his children, clean hands, pure hearts, good grace, good God. His name is Jesus. So we're going into a time called Easter, as probably you know. And this is a big time for us. And not just because it's Easter, but of what it represents. That God deemed you worthy, that He would pay the ultimate price for you. You know, someone said this week again to me, you know, if you were the only person on this world, Jesus would still come for you. So as we're going to sing the next song, I want to invite you, and maybe this is, you know, you're not used to Easter or stuff like that. That's also all right, and you can reflect on this. But this is kind of a song that's just going to remind us of what exactly this time is about. I cast my mind to Calvary, where Jesus bled and died for me. I see His wounds, His hands, His feet, my Savior on that cursed tree. His body bound and drenched in tears, they laid him down in Joseph's tomb, the entrance sealed by heavy stone. Messiah still and all alone. Oh, praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, praise his name forevermore. For endless days we will sing your praise. Oh Lord, oh Lord our God. And on the third, at break of dawn, the Son of Heaven rose again. Oh, trampled death, where is your sting? And the angels roar for Christ the King. Oh, praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, praise his name forevermore. For endless days we will sing your praise. Oh Lord our God. And this is the promise. He shall return in robes of white. The blazing sun shall pierce the night, and I will rise among the saints, my gaze transfixed on Jesus' face. Oh, praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, praise his name forevermore. Your name, we will sing your praise. Oh Lord our God. Oh, praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, praise his name forevermore. For endless days we will sing your praise. Oh Lord our God. For endless days we will sing your praise. Oh Lord our God. You guys can take a seat. Thank you very much. how lekker was that? I wanna invite you before we get going with the last week of riding. I really want to invite you to Easter. I mean, we are so excited, and we've got such an amazing a time scheduled. So don't miss it. It's 2 parts. The Chronicles of Easter, part 1 on Friday, part 2 on Sunday. So marvel. Watch out. We also got some installations here. You need to be ready for the sequels. Okay. So don't miss it. If you're here in town, please, we would love for you to join us for this time of remembrance, of celebration, and this is really a time where we really get to, back to basics. Like Rassi said when he was with the Springboks, let the main thing be the main thing. That's what he said, and then we won the World Cup. So maybe sometimes in our lives, we need to get back to basics. And if you think of your spiritual life, if that's something you're pursuing, it's always good to get back to basics. But I promise you, this is going to challenge you in a different way. So don't miss that. So if you are joining us for the first time, or it's kind of you've jumped in the middle and you kind of trying to figure out what this past 6 weeks has been about, you can go and check. We're busy with a series called Ride in the Eye. We're in the last installment, so I urge you to go and rewatch it on our YouTube or on waypoint.org on the app. There's so many places you can go see it. Go and watch. And we started the series out with arguably one of the craziest, most hectic, disturbing, wacky story of ancient literature, and it was kind of a microcosm of our culture these days, where we kind of live with this assumption, and Israel lived with that assumption that I have the freedom to do what I want, when I want, and with whom I want, and then we put this little tag at the end because we civilized, and to make it sound good, we put this one there is as long as it doesn't hurt anybody. And that's how we want to live. And this is the way that Israel lived. Israel was essentially supposed to be was God's chosen people, and it was not something in terms of exclusion. It was Israel was God's plan for the world. God was starting something new and was establishing a nation to which other nations could look at and say, "Wow, their God must be the God, because look at them, look at their lives, look at what they're doing." And this was what God was instilling through it. But I'll give just a little teaser. That wasn't God's only plan. That was a part of God's plan, but we'll get to that a bit later. But they were supposed to be this, but constantly Israel fell in this trap of doing what they wanted, when they wanted, and they started looking around and said, "Well, I want what the other nations have. I want what they want. I want to serve who they serve. I want to have those types of freedoms." And eventually what happened was they would do what many of us did when we were caught as a teenager in the police station. We would phone our parents, the very person whose rules we broke. We phone them and say, "Dad, bail me out. I need your help." And this is a cycle that kept happening in Israel in that time, was disobedience, disaster, and deliverance. So God was supposed to be the king of Israel. He laid down a law. This law would govern the nation, and then he would appoint judges who would administer this law to the people. But as we know, they didn't, and in fact, Israel wandered from this divine plan, this divine framework that God had set out for them, and they wandered because they were looking around. They saw what they didn't have, and they falsely assumed that this would bring freedom. They did what they wanted when they wanted, and then this book of Judges ends with this phrase, and it's kind of a summary of this whole time that Israel was in. And it said in those days there was no king in Israel. God was supposed to be king, but he wasn't really the king. Or at least it didn't reflect in the way they were living. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. And that brings us to today. You see, all the while, as we think God wasn't the king, God actually, and I'm sure people would look around and maybe there were some people who wanted to follow God, and as we're going to see in the story in the moment, there were some people who really wanted to follow God, but they were looking around, and you would probably sit in that situation too and look around and say, where is God? Where is God? Why isn't He the king anymore? What happened? Has He abandoned us? Has He left us? But as we're going to see, all the while, even in the midst of the worst chaos, God was doing this. He was setting the stage for Easter. God's divine plan for the world. You see, when the nation of Israel started, when the nation of Israel was still just one man, and that man's name was Abraham. You might have heard of him. He was known as the father of Israel. He was the guy who God made the promise to, and God said, listen, like, Abraham, I'm choosing you, and there's nothing you've done to deserve what I'm going to give you, but you're going to be part of my plan. And I'm going to, through you and through you, my plan is going to bless everyone in the world. Not just Israel. And a few babies later, a few births later, Abraham, and he wouldn't live to see it, but Abraham's lineage grew to be a nation of Israel. And God's plan was for Israel to be this cocoon, this framework, this light to the world, so that eventually the world, and so be it, the world would be blessed. The world would come to know God, not just Israel. That was God's plan all along. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's get back to Judges. So we're in Judges, and in the midst of all this chaos, we find this amazing story. In the midst of everyone doing what is right, and we find this amazing story of an old Hebrew woman, Israelite woman, a farmer, and a Moabite woman, a woman that's not even of Israel. We find this story, and as we're going to see, God is truly at work. So, in the time of the Judges, this is plays off. So this is a different book, same time. Okay, so Judges, but then there's this book after Judges called Ruth. Now this plays smack bang in Judges. In fact, this is what it says. It says, in the days when the judges ruled, there was famine in the land. Daar was hongersnood. Mense was honger. And so a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, they went to live for a while in the country of Moab. Now Moab was a neighboring kind of a neighboring country. It was kind of like, there was a nation between them. So if you can probably say, probably like Zambia. You have to go through Zimbabwe to get to Zambia. It's kind of that scenario. So they had to go through another nation to get to Moab. So it was kind of on the other side of the Dead Sea, if you kind of know that area of the world. On the other side of the Dead Sea, they probably could have swam because, as you know, you don't sink in the Dead Sea, but I'm sure they probably took another route. So this man and his wife and his 2 sons, they head off to Moab in search of a better life because there is famine in Israel at that time. And then tragedy strikes, as happens in life. Tragedy strikes, but before tragedy strikes, so this man and his wife, I'm not going to pronounce the men's names because it is quite a mouthful, but the woman's name is Naomi, and Naomi, she had 2 sons, and these 2 sons married 2 Moabite women, okay, which, if as we talked about earlier, the law of God actually permitted Israelites to marry the other nations of women, not because God was against intercultural marriage, but at that time, in the time frame in which this was playing off, You were not just marrying someone else. You were marrying what they brought in what they believed. They brought in their gods, their customs, their stuff. And God's plan at that time was so specific because God couldn't, it was hard enough for the Israelites to not marry the other nations and have their eyes wander and see what they wanted. Now, if bringing marriage into the equation, you bringing all sorts of stuff contrary to what God has planned for you into your culture and into this nation, into your family. And we're not just talking about, they're driving on the right-hand side of the road and small stuff like that. No, we're talking about some evil customs and some really terrible stuff which today we would look at and that is serious human rights violations. They would bring in terrible stuff into this. So that's why God put down this law, but nonetheless, they married these Moabite women, and then tragedy strikes. See, the husband of Naomi died. And a short while later, in the book of Ruth, it says the two husbands, the two sons, also died. And here is Naomi in a foreign country, a widow, not just losing her husband, but also losing her two sons. Her only source of income, her only stability in that time. And understandably, Naomi is in a terrible state. Maybe that's where you've been. Maybe you've been where Naomi is. A place where you just cry out to God and say, God, where are you? And Naomi decides to do this most sensible thing. She decides she's going back to her homeland. She's going back to her hometown of Bethlehem. Between her people, because that's the best chance she's got. These are the people she knows. These are the people she grew up with. There's some family there. But essentially, she's kind of given up at this stage on God, because what does she have to live for anymore? But something amazing happens in the midst of this. Naomi couldn't see it, I'm sure, at that time. But so the two wives of her sons, her daughters-in-law, the one decides to stay behind, but the other one, Ruth, decided, no, I'm going to go with my mother-in-law. Just think about that for a moment. You're going to leave your family or your people, your culture, follow your mother-in-law. Yes. Yeah, I love my mother-in-law. I would do that anytime. But I know there's some people that have problems with their mother-in-law. Yeah. Lifio more. So there they go. And Ruth and Naomi says, no, what are you doing? And Ruth then, this next verse is one of the most beautiful pieces of verses in this, not just in this book, but of the Bible. She says this, but Ruth replied, where you will go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people. And she has no idea yet the profoundness of these next words that she says, and your God will be my God. Where you will die, there I will be buried. And Ruth takes everything because she's seen something of a God that's different. It's different to what she's used to. Even though she's in the midst of her own struggles and her own problems. She just lost her husband. And in the midst of this, she sees something of a God she knows nothing about. And decides, I'm going to go and give everything, lay everything down. I'm going to follow this woman and her God. And there they go. And they make the dangerous journey back to Israel, into Bethlehem. And as they're going to town, I'm sure everyone starts looking and wait, is that Naomi? What? Naomi is, and then everyone starts whispering and like, yeah, that's Naomi, and who's that with her? Like, who's that? It's definitely not an Israelite. I can see that. No, it's I don't know. And people start whispering, and some people have the courage to go up and greet her and welcome Naomi, and Naomi is so heartbroken. She's so down in the dumps. She said, no, my name has changed. I'm not Naomi anymore. That Naomi you knew is dead. My name is now Mara, which means bitter. Her name is now bitter. In fact, this is what she would also go on to say. She would say, this is how much she's kind of, not given up on God, but she's kind of just said, oh God, I'm done. And she said, the Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me. So she believed that God is actually busy punishing her for something. That's what she believed. But all the while, God was busy with something. And in that time, so Ruth and Naomi, they're living together. But as you might know, that this is a very, very hard time to live and to be alive. An even harder time to be alive if you're a woman, because there aren't as many freedoms and stuff afforded to women that there are these days. And it's even harder for someone whose husband has died. And here we have two widows living in a world that essentially isn't designed for them to thrive. It isn't designed for them to it's to actually survive. But let's see what happens. So it's it's the time of the barley harvest in Bethlehem and in Israel. And so what would happen in the barley harvest is the farmers, they would harvest the barley, but they wouldn't harvest everything. They would harvest the stuff, but then the kind of the residual barley that would fall or that would be on the lower ends of the stuff, they would leave that. And it was designed that way by God's Lord to do that, so that the widows and the vulnerable women in the community would come and they would come and pick up that and they would go and either sell it or be sustained from that, and that would help them survive. So this was also a way that was designed to help the most vulnerable in the community and for the community to start looking after one another. So they called it gleaning. So, and the time that they were gleaning, the harvesters is already harvested, and now the widows, they would come into the fields and they would pick up the gleaning. And so Ruth goes and starts gleaning on this one farmer's land. This farmer's name was Boaz. Now Boaz, it says that Boaz was a God-fearing man. He was a man who followed God. In the midst of this time of the judges where everything is crazy, and they just came out of a famine, and here's this man, upstanding man, who's trying earnestly to find God. And so Boaz recognizes, and obviously in those times, news traveled fast in a small town, much as it does now. But now we have, Siemendelaar and those stuff, to kind of keep us busy. What kept them busy was, talking, Hey, have you heard about Ruth, your Moabite woman? Yeah. And she came in, what's up with her? Leaving and coming with her skoonma? Are you, what? And they're trying to figure out this woman, I'm sure the community was abuzz, Ruth, and I'm sure Boaz heard the stories, and Boaz sees Ruth. And eventually he sees Ruth on his lands, and he realizes, oh, that's the woman. But Boaz saw something in Ruth that he didn't see in other people. Boaz saw something in Ruth that was godly. He went to Ruth, and we know this because this is what he replied to Ruth when he saw her. He said, I've been told all about what you've done, and about how done for your mother-in-law, and since the death of your husband, how you left your father and your mother and your homeland and came to live with a people you did not know before. So may the Lord repay you for what you've done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. And Boaz is seeing, and he's seeing, I see what you're doing. I see your heart. And I trust that God is going to use you. I trust that God will honor the choices that you've made. And as Ruth and Boaz didn't know at the time, they would have a much bigger part to play than if they would ever realize. Don't believe me? Who are we talking about 3,000 years later? Can you tell me who the king of Moab was at that time? No. We're talking about Ruth and Boaz. We're talking about Naomi, who thought God was against her. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So Ruth gets back at home, and she tells Naomi about Boaz, and Naomi's like, Boaz, yeah. Boaz is it's a relative of ours, far along, but a relative nonetheless. It's a relative, but they're far. But I know Boaz. And then Naomi gives this crazy idea to Ruth, and she says to Ruth, go and ask Boaz to be your kinsman redeemer. Ask Boaz to marry you. Now, a kinsman redeemer is, as I said, it was also translated as an avenger. Now, I'm not talking about the capes and battling aliens. That's a whole different book. A kinsman redeemer is what it was. It was someone who stepped in the gap, and it was usually a relative who would stand in the gap for a widow, that would stand in the gap for someone. And what they would do is they would essentially make them part of their family. Inheritance, they would take on their debt, they would bring in their extended family, they would look after. We all have, I don't know, not everyone, but most of us, have kind of a relative or someone who's got kind of like, has got a bit of money, and like whenever there's a tough spot in the family, we always go to that person, It's kind of like this, but far more demanding on that person, because, you can go to that woman, Tani, and they would say, no, and then maybe later they'll sneak something in, to show that they actually care. But this was big. In fact, let me show you what this would require of the kinsman redeemer. They were required to protect the impoverished family. Keyword family there. It's not just one person you take on. You take the package. They protect them. They repurchase lost property. They redeem relatives sold as slaves. And they provide an heir for the male relatives, which was important because, as I said earlier, in a world where it was designed for women not to succeed, a male heir was very important as a way to provide in the family. And so here Boaz is, and Boaz, this is what he has to give if Ruth asks him. Now, Ruth does eventually go and ask Boaz to be his kinsman redeemer, her kinsman redeemer, and that she and Naomi is a package deal, and that they also had property that they've lost, and that Boaz would have to repurchase that property that belonged to Naomi's family. All this. She goes to Boaz, and we kind of romanticize this scenario. We think, Ruth was this beautiful woman, and he walks in, and Boaz just fall in love, and then he was like, I'll give you everything, almost like the Esther story, But this is different. I'm not saying Ruth was not a beautiful woman, but we tend to miss when we think of the story of that, we tend to miss a key part here. This was a big, big decision for Boaz. Not just for him, but for his family as well. He's bringing in people he has no obligation to bringing in a woman, and their children and their people are going to share in the inheritance of his children. It's sure. That's, if you've ever had to deal with boodles and stuff like that, that's some hectic stuff, and he has no obligation to do this. But Boaz, the man that he is, the man after God's heart, the man who's searching God, and he goes and he says to Ruth, I would love to do this, but there is a relative who's closer than I am, who's first in line, who has to say, he kind of has first dibs. All right, so Boaz goes to this relative. He asks the relative, listen, this is the scenario, but you can decide if you want it. And this guy says, okay, yeah, I'll do it. And then listen to what Boaz says here. The guy says, yes, so it's kind of, no, like now the problem is sorted. It's not Boaz's problem anymore because this relative has decided, yes, I will take it on. So Boaz is in the perfect scenario here that Ruth and Naomi is now this guy's problem. But no, Boaz says, okay, but there's something you should know. It's not just them. There is a lost property that you have to purchase. It means that the whole list, it means that what happens is you're going to have to provide for them. You're going to have to redeem their lost property. You're going to have to provide male heir. You're going to have to bring them into your family, the part of your estate. And you would be thinking, no, Boaz, you lost. You just ruined the deal. And the male heir understandably said, no, it's too high a price. You can do it. And Boaz does it. He steps in and doesn't realize the significance yet of what that meant. But Boaz stepped into that gap as kinsman redeemer for Ruth and Naomi and brings them into the family. And later on, he and Ruth would have a son. And his name would be Obed. And I'm sure as Naomi held little Obed in her hands, she would be reminded of the goodness of God. She would be reminded that even she, who had given up on God, had a part to play in this. But that baby that she would have held and looked at, she would have no idea the significance of that moment. You see, Obed, the son of Ruth and Boaz, I told you that God was planning for Easter. God had Easter in mind. And so Ruth and Boaz and little Obed grew up, and Obed had a son. Obed's son was called Jesse. And then later on, Jesse would grow up, and Jesse would have a number of sons. And whilst Jesse is farming in Bethlehem on his grandfather's, or has some land, he's farming there and with his sons. And the prophet Samuel, he gets a word from God. And this is what the prophet Samuel heard from God. God said, fill your horn with oil and be on your way. I'm sending you to Jesse of Bethlehem. I have chosen one of his sons to be king. And so, those of you who know the Bible probably know the story. Samuel goes and lines up all Jesse's sons. And Samuel says, no, wait, there's one more. Where's the missing one? And he says, no, it's the youngest one. He's out in the field. And he says, bring the son. And that son stands there in front of him, the youngest son of Jesse. And Samuel anoints him to be king. And we know that son today to be the King David. And King David would later become the king of Israel. But what set him apart from the other kings of Israel, and why there would be no one else again like him to lead Israel, was David was a king, but he knew that he was not the king. He knew and understood. And the word called him a man after God's own heart, because he understood this fact that God is still the king. And when I yield what I want and what and yes, David had his flaws, but he understood that it's not about what I want when I want. He understood that God's king, and under God's authority, I experienced maximum freedom. Under God's authority, when I choose to proclaim and declare that God is the king, God has the best in me, I become a part of the greater story. I become a footnote in a greater story. God's story. And Nathan, the prophet of that time, he would later say this to David. He would say, David, your house and your kingdom will endure forever before me. Through your throne will be established forever. And he's not referring to David's physical kingdom. He's referring to, David, you're a part of God's plan. Something big is coming in your line. And about 25 births later, down the line, we read this. So David's son and son and son and son and son. Then we get to Eleazar, the father of Matan. Matan, the father of Jacob. And Jacob, the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary. And Mary was the mother of Jesus, who is called the Messiah. And in came, in ushered, because of Ruth and Boaz and their faithfulness, because of David and his heart, in the midst of a world that went contrary to trusting God, where trusting God was unthinkable. They decided to trust God, and in that line was born a new king. You see, Boaz and Ruth, they never knew that they were an important and fragile link in the story of God. When you read the line from Abraham through to Jesus, they list all the fathers and their sons and the fathers and their sons, and when they get to Boaz, they just make an extra note there. They say, Boaz, the father, they say Jesse, Obed, the son of Boaz and Ruth, a Moabite woman who decided to put her trust in God. Said, wow, isn't that amazing? Decided to trust God and become part of a greater story, the story of Jesus and God's plan for this world. You see, God's plan for this world has always been for the world, not just for a select few. And when Jesus came in and said, okay, I'm instituting something new. I know what you've seen before. I know that law and this stuff were designed for a specific purpose, but I am here. It is done. I have come to show you something new. And this king, this new king called Jesus, he would do something that no other king did and no other king would do. He leveraged his power for the powerless. And he would teach and show us how to treat one another. And then he would stand before a judge called Pontius Pilate, who was kind of begging Jesus, looking for a reason not to send this guy to death. And he asked him, listen, are you a king? Jesus said, yes, it is true. I am a king. But my kingdom is not of this world. Which is strange. Think of that. But because it was so new, God's kingdom and Jesus' kingdom that he came to establish was not a kingdom of this world. It was a kingdom of the heart. It was a kingdom of the heart. It was a kingdom of love. It was a kingdom that's not built on a king and his subjects, and the king has the right, and the king enforces his right on the people, which was the way. It wasn't a king that leveraged his power for his own gain. It wasn't a king that didn't care for his people, that didn't know the names of his people. It was a king that did this. There was a king that laid down his life for his friends and his enemies. Paul would later write, while I was still a sinner, while I was still an enemy of God, like Naomi, while I was still giving God the blame, he laid down his life for his friends and his enemies. Those he had every right to rule. He had every right to play the king card, but he didn't. And in doing so, he removed all doubt as to whether or not he could be trusted, whether or not God could be trusted. You see, you are serving something or someone. Something or someone is the king in your life. Might not admit it, but something or someone is driving what you do, why you do what you do. And I'm not saying, okay, stop following that king or stop following that thing or get out of denial. I'm not saying that. But I do want to ask you this question. Does that thing or that someone or that belief or someone you've put on a pedestal, that thing that you've given the throne of your heart to, has it ever laid down its life for you? Does that king have your best interest in heart? Does that king love you? Is he madly in love with you and want the best for you? You see, once we realize that I am not a king, but I'm serving a king, we get to the place where, okay, who do I want to follow? Who do I want to lay my life down for? Would I lay my life down for something or someone that is just going to bring me down, bring me back, put me back and worse off than I was? We know all those stories. We've seen all those stories. We've never admitted it in our own lives, but we've seen those stories. Or will I choose to trust the one who is worthy to be trusted? When we sing worthy, when we say, you are worthy, God, we don't just say that because we think it's a good idea. We say it because Jesus validated his claim to be trusted at Easter. And he would say, the old is gone. I'm ushering a new kingdom for the world. For people, for every single nation. Frak, if Ruth can do it, I can do it. So, this kingdom looks differently. It goes against what this world does. It goes against what this world is telling us. It looks like this. I no longer want to do what is right in my eyes. I am ready to do what is right in your eyes. Not because someone said so. It's not because, someone forced me or did it. It is because I realize that God has what's best for me. He wants to be my king, not to lord over me. He doesn't want to be my king because he wants something from me. No. He wants to be my king because he has something for me. He has something for you. And we're going next week. Don't miss Friday and Sunday, guys. Chronicles of Easter, because we're gonna see exactly not just what happened, but we're actually I'm gonna ask this important question. Now, what is holding you back? What is holding you back? But this morning I want to ask you the same question. What is holding you back from proclaiming God as your King? What is holding you back? And if anything is holding you back, I want to encourage you this morning. I want to invite the band on stage. We're going to end in a song. And I want you to really see the words in the song for what it is. It's called Heaven is Here. The kingdom of God is here, but it's not here. It's here. It's knocking on the door of your heart. Because secretly, deep down in you, you know that this is what you want. This is what you need. is a life that's not about me anymore. It's about something bigger. It is a life that will mean something in the greater story that's not about me. Heaven is here, living within us. Heaven is here. Our God is with us. Wherever you are in your life right now, whether you've messed up, whether you think God has abandoned you, I want to encourage you, may you be encouraged this morning to know that God, as with Boaz and Ruth, is still knocking on the door of your heart and still inviting you in to something bigger.
Love and compassion, justice and mercy found a home. The God of creation, humbled and clothed in flesh and bone. Jesus, the sweetest name I know. Heaven is here. Heaven is here, living within us. Heaven is here. Heaven is here, and our God is with us. This is our freedom, living to glorify the Son, and here as in heaven, walking beside the risen one. There's so much power in your love, your love. Heaven is here. Heaven is here, living within us. Heaven is here. Heaven is here, and our God is with us. Heaven is here. Heaven is here, living within us. Heaven is here. Heaven is here, and our God is with us. Let your will be done in us as we exalt the Son. We are aware of what you've done. Oh, let your kingdom come. Let your will be done in us as we exalt the Son. We are aware of what you've done.
Oh, let your kingdom come. Let your will be done in us as we exalt the Son. We are aware of what you've done. Oh, let your kingdom come. Let your will be done. heaven is here. Our God is with us. Our God is with
And our God is with
You made a way to be reconciled with you. Thank you, Father, that you are the worthiest King of all, and that we would have the courage to recognize that. But not just that, Father, that we would take the step to do what is right, not in our eyes, but in your eyes. To see things the way you see them, to see situations the way you see them, but also, God, to see people the way you see them. To love our families, our children, our wives and husbands, even our enemies, the way that you do. You've enabled us to do that. So, Father, may we take up this invitation of love and freedom. Thank you for that. Amen. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, everyone. Remember Easter, Friday and Sunday, part 1 and part 2. Invite. If ever there was a moment to invite someone, really, if there's someone on your heart, please invite them to next week. We're going to have a great time. We're so excited. And if you are traveling, please stay safe. And then also, very important, the coffee shop is open, so we would love for you to join us at the coffee shop. If you want to have a further talk, we'd love to chat with you. I will be here in front. Have a great week, and we'll see you on Friday. Cheers.